All right, so picture this. It's October 1960, and the executives at Oliver Corporation are sitting in a mahogany-paneled boardroom in Chicago, staring at numbers that simply shouldn't exist. Not in a good way. Their flagship tractor line, the one they'd bet everything on, the one that was supposed to save the company and crush their competitors, it's not just failing, it's actively destroying them. Every single unit they sell is losing money, not a little money, catastrophic, company-ending money. And here's the thing that makes this story so brutal, so perfectly tragic. They saw it coming. They absolutely saw it coming. But by the time they understood what was happening, it was already too late. The machine they'd created, literally and figuratively, had taken on a life of its own, and it was eating them alive from the inside out. See, Oliver wasn't some fly-by-night operation that didn't know what they were doing. These guys were legends, absolute legends in the farm equipment world. The Oliver name went back to 1855, when James Oliver figured out how to make a chilled plow that could cut through the thick prairie soil of the Midwest without constantly needing to be cleaned. Revolutionary stuff for the time. That innovation built an empire. By the early 1900s, Oliver was one of the most respected names in American agriculture. Then came 1929. Not a great year for anyone, right? But Oliver did something smart. Instead of collapsing like so many others during the Depression, they merged with 3 other companies. Hart-Parr, which basically invented the farm tractor as we know it, Nichols and Shepard, famous for their threshing machines, and American Seeding Machine Company. Together, they formed the Oliver Farm Equipment Company, and suddenly they had the resources, the patents, and the engineering talent to take on anyone. John Deere, International Harvester, you name it. Through the 30s and 40s, Oliver built some genuinely innovative tractors. The Oliver 70, introduced in 1935, was the first tractor with a high-compression engine designed specifically to run on 70-octane gasoline. Sounds technical, but what it meant in practice was that farmers got more power without burning more fuel. The Oliver 70 sold like crazy. Then came the Oliver 88 in 1947, with a 6-cylinder engine when most competitors were still using 4s. Smooth, powerful, reliable. By the early 1950s, Oliver was riding high. They had maybe 6 or 7% of the tractor market, which doesn't sound like much until you realize that John Deere and International Harvester had most of it locked up between them. 6% for Oliver meant they were solid, profitable, respected. They weren't winning, but they were definitely in the game. And then they decided they wanted to win. Here's where things start to go sideways. The mid-1950s were weird for the farm equipment industry. Farmers were getting bigger, fields were getting bigger. The old 40-horsepower tractor that had been the workhorse of American agriculture for 20 years wasn't cutting it. Farmers wanted power, they wanted speed, they wanted tractors that could pull bigger implements, work faster, cover more ground in a day. The market was shifting toward these big, powerful machines, and Oliver's management looked at that shift and thought, we need to get ahead of this. We need to build the biggest, most powerful, most advanced tractor anyone's ever seen. And we need to do it before Deere or Harvester figures out what we're up to. So in 1957, they started working on what would become the 1800 series. And this is where the problems start. The 1800 was supposed to be Oliver's moonshot, their statement piece, the tractor that would prove they belonged at the top of the industry. They threw everything at it. New engine designs, new hydraulic systems, new transmission options. They wanted this thing to be able to do everything a farmer could possibly ask for and then some. 70 to 80 horsepower, which at the time was enormous. Diesel or gasoline engines, power steering, independent power takeoff, live hydraulics. This was genuinely advanced stuff for the late 1950s. But here's what they didn't fully think through. Building an advanced tractor is one thing. Building an advanced tractor that can be manufactured reliably, at scale, at a profit, that's something completely different. See, Oliver had always been more of an engineering company than a manufacturing company. They loved innovation, they loved pushing boundaries, but their production facilities, their supply chain, their quality control systems, those hadn't really been updated since the 1930s. They were trying to build a 1960s tractor in a 1930s factory. And that gap
That fundamental mismatch between ambition and capability was about to destroy them. So the Oliver 1800 launches in 1958, and at first, it actually looks like a success. Farmers love it. The reviews are incredible. Farm magazines are calling it one of the most sophisticated tractors on the market. Dealers are excited. Orders are pouring in. Oliver's management is probably thinking they pulled it off, right? They bet big and it's paying off. Except it's not. Not even close. Within 6 months of the 1800 hitting farms, Oliver's warranty department starts getting calls. Lots of calls. Hydraulic systems failing, transmissions grinding, engine problems, electrical gremlins. At first, it's just a trickle, normal stuff for any new model. You expect some bugs. But then the trickle becomes a stream, and the stream becomes a flood. By mid-1959, Oliver dealers are basically drowning in warranty claims. Tractors are coming back with problems that shouldn't exist on a machine that's barely a year old. And here's the nightmare scenario that Oliver didn't anticipate. They'd sold these tractors with one of the most generous warranty programs in the industry, 2 years full coverage. They did that to compete with Deere and Harvester, who had deeper pockets and better dealer networks. Oliver figured a strong warranty would give farmers confidence to take a chance on them instead of the big guys. Smart marketing move. Except when your product has systemic reliability problems, a generous warranty doesn't build confidence. It builds financial catastrophe. Every 1800 that came back under warranty cost Oliver money. Parts costs, labor costs, dealer costs, transportation costs. And because the problems were often complex, involving multiple systems, the repairs were expensive, really expensive. Oliver was paying out thousands of dollars per tractor in warranty claims, and they'd sold thousands of these things. Let me paint the picture of what was actually failing in the 1800, because this gets into the real engineering tragedy of the tractor. Oliver had designed this beautiful, complex hydraulic system. It used a single pump to power everything: the 3-point hitch, the power steering, the remote hydraulic outlets, the brakes. One pump, multiple functions. On paper, that's elegant, efficient, saves weight, saves cost, simplifies the design. In practice, that one pump was being asked to do too much. It was constantly under load, constantly cycling, constantly building pressure and releasing pressure and building it again. And the seals couldn't handle it. Hydraulic seals in the 1950s were okay. They worked fine under steady pressure, but this constant cycling, this rapid pressure fluctuation, the seals would fail, sometimes in a few hundred hours, sometimes sooner. When the seals failed, hydraulic fluid would leak, and when hydraulic fluid leaked, the whole system would lose pressure. Suddenly, your power steering doesn't work, your 3-point hitch won't lift, your remote outlets are dead. The tractor is, for all practical purposes, crippled. And replacing those seals, it wasn't a quick fix. You had to disassemble major portions of the hydraulic system. It was a 12-15-hour job for a skilled mechanic. Oliver was paying dealer rates for every single one of these repairs, and they were happening constantly. But the hydraulics were just one problem. The transmission was another disaster. Oliver had developed a new synchronized transmission for the 1800, 10 speeds forward, 2 reverse. Again, very advanced for the time. Most tractors had maybe 4 or 5 speeds. Oliver wanted to give farmers precise control over ground speed so they could match their tractor to whatever implement they were pulling. Great idea. The execution, not so great. The synchronizers, the components that allowed you to shift smoothly between gears without grinding, were made from a brass alloy that Oliver's engineers had specified. Brass was traditional for synchronizers. It worked fine in automobiles. But tractors aren't automobiles. Tractors operate under constant heavy load. They're pulling plows, discs, planters. The synchronizers in the Oliver 1800 were being subjected to forces way beyond what they were designed for. They'd wear out, sometimes in the first season. When they wore out, the transmission would start grinding, popping out of gear, refusing to shift. And once that started, the damage would cascade. Worn synchronizers would chew up the gear teeth. Damaged gears would destroy bearings. Before long, you needed a complete transmission rebuild. Cost to Oliver, $3,000 to $4,000 per tractor in 1950 money. Per tractor, and they were doing hundreds of these repairs.
By 1960, Oliver's financial situation has gone from concerning to existential crisis. They're hemorrhaging cash on warranty repairs for the 1800.
But here's the thing that makes this even worse. They can't just stop selling them. They've invested millions in tooling and parts inventory and dealer training. The 1800 is their flagship product. If they pull it from the market, they're admitting total failure. Their reputation tanks, their dealers lose confidence. Farmers stop buying Oliver tractors altogether. So they're stuck in this trap where they have to keep selling a product they know is destroying them financially. And it gets worse, because while all this is happening, their competitors aren't standing still. John Deere introduces their 8010 series in 1960. Beautiful machines, reliable, well-built. Deere had the manufacturing capability to actually produce what they designed. International Harvester had just launched their 60 series, also solid, also reliable. Farmers who might have considered an Oliver 1800 are looking at these new Deere and Harvester tractors and thinking, why would I risk it with Oliver when I can buy a Deere and know it's going to work? Oliver's market share starts dropping, not slowly, fast. By late 1960, they've gone from 6% of the market to maybe 4%. And that drop in an industry with thin margins to begin with is catastrophic. Less market share means less revenue. Less revenue means less cash to cover those warranty costs, and the warranty costs just keep piling up. Inside Oliver, there's panic. The engineering team knows what went wrong. They designed systems that were too complex for their manufacturing capabilities to produce consistently. They specified components that couldn't handle the real-world stresses of farm work. They pushed innovation beyond what their quality control systems could maintain. But fixing these problems, that requires completely redesigning major systems. New hydraulic pumps, new seals, new synchronizer materials, upgraded bearings. It's not a matter of tweaking a few things, it's a complete overhaul. And Oliver doesn't have the money to. Every dollar they have is going out the door to cover warranty claims. They can't afford to retool. They can't afford to redesign. They're trapped. They can either keep building tractors they know are flawed, or they can shut down production entirely and admit defeat. In October 1960, Oliver's board of directors holds an emergency meeting. The numbers are brutal. The company has lost over $15 million in the previous 18 months. Their cash reserves are nearly depleted. They're projecting another $10 million in losses over the next year if things continue as they are. And things are definitely going to continue as they are, because the 1800s already in the field are still under warranty, and those warranty claims are going to keep coming. The board makes a decision. Oliver Corporation cannot survive independently. They need a buyer. Someone with deep pockets who can absorb the warranty costs, finance the necessary redesigns, and give Oliver the manufacturing infrastructure they desperately need. It's not a merger. It's not a partnership. It's survival. By November, they found their buyer, White Motor Corporation. White was primarily a truck manufacturer, but they'd been looking to diversify into farm equipment. They saw Oliver as a bargain, a respected brand with good dealer networks and solid products, except for that one catastrophic tractor line that was bleeding money. White's executives figured they could fix the 1800s problems with their superior manufacturing capabilities. They could absorb the short-term losses in exchange for long-term market position. So in January 1961, White Motor Corporation acquires Oliver. It's announced as a merger, but everyone in the industry knows what it is. Oliver couldn't survive on their own. The 1800 killed them. A single tractor line, designed with the best intentions, executed with inadequate manufacturing capability, brought down a company that had been a pillar of agriculture for 100 years. And here's the brutal irony. White did fix the problems. By 1962, they'd redesigned the hydraulic system with better pumps and upgraded seals. They'd switched to different synchronizer materials in the transmission. They'd improved quality control across the board. The later 1800 models built under White ownership were actually pretty good tractors, reliable, durable, everything the original 1800 should have been. But by then, the damage was done. Farmers remembered, dealers remembered. The Oliver name, which had once meant innovation and quality, now carried a stigma. Why risk an Oliver when you could buy a Deere? Market share kept falling.
So, what actually happened here? How does a company with over a century of success, a company that literally helped settle the American Midwest, get taken down by one tractor model?
because that's the question that's haunted industry analysts for decades. The Oliver story becomes this cautionary tale that gets taught in business schools. It's used as an example of what happens when engineering ambition outpaces manufacturing reality. Let's break down the mechanical lessons first, because this is important. The Oliver 1800 failed not because it was a bad design conceptually. The ideas behind it were sound. A centralized hydraulic system made sense. A synchronized transmission with multiple speeds made sense. These were genuinely good ideas that would become industry standard within a decade. The problem was execution. Oliver's engineers designed systems that required precision manufacturing and consistent quality control, and Oliver's factories couldn't deliver that precision consistently. Think about those hydraulic seals. The seals themselves weren't inherently bad, but they required the mating surfaces, the places where the seals contacted metal, to be machined to very tight tolerances. We're talking variations of a few thousandths of an inch. If the surface wasn't smooth enough, or if it had microscopic scratches or imperfections, the seal would fail prematurely. Oliver's machining equipment, much of it dating from the 1930s and 40s, couldn't maintain those tolerances across thousands of parts. Some hydraulic components came out perfect. Others had just enough variation to cause problems. And in a complex system like the 1800s hydraulics, you only need one weak point for the whole thing to fail. This is the tragedy of the 1800. It was a tractor that worked beautifully when everything was built perfectly, but it had zero tolerance for manufacturing variation. And in 1958, Oliver simply didn't have the quality control systems to build it consistently. Compare this to John Deere's approach during the same period. Deere's engineers were conservative. When they designed a new tractor, they over-engineered everything. Bigger bearings than strictly necessary, more robust seals, simpler hydraulic systems with fewer potential failure points. Their tractors weren't as sophisticated as Oliver's. They didn't have as many features, but they could be manufactured consistently with 1950s equipment, and they worked reliably in the field. Deere understood their capabilities and designed within them. Oliver didn't. Now let's talk about the business decisions that made this fatal, because Oliver could have survived the 1800s problems if they'd handled them differently. They could have issued a recall, brought tractors back in, retrofitted them with upgraded components, taken the financial hit all at once, but preserved their reputation. They didn't do that. They tried to fix problems individually as they arose, hoping that at some point the failure rate would slow down. It never did. They also could have limited production while they fixed the design problems, build fewer tractors, reduce the warranty exposure, take time to get it right. But they were afraid of losing dealer confidence and market share, so they kept building and selling tractors they knew had problems, which only made the financial bleeding worse. These weren't stupid people making obviously bad decisions. These were experienced executives trying to navigate an impossible situation. But every choice they made, every attempt to minimize the damage, only made things worse.
Here's what happened to Oliver after White took over. The brand survived, technically, for another 2 decades. White kept producing Oliver tractors through the 1960s and into the 70s. They fixed the 1800s problems. They introduced new models that were actually quite good. The Oliver 2200, launched in 1968, was a solid machine. Powerful, reliable, well-built. But it didn't matter. Farmers had moved on. By the early 1970s, Oliver's market share had dropped below 2%. White kept the brand alive mostly for dealer network reasons, but everyone knew it was over. In 1974, White acquired another struggling brand, Minneapolis Moline. They consolidated everything under White Farm Equipment. The Oliver name appeared on a few more tractor models through the mid-70s, but by 1976, it was effectively dead. A brand that had existed for over 120 years, that had been part of American agriculture before the Civil War, was gone. And you can trace its death directly back to that board meeting in 1957 when someone said, "Let's build the most advanced tractor anyone's ever seen." Today, if you talk to farmers who remember the 1800, you get mixed reactions. Some of them had tractors that worked fine.
They ran them for years without major problems and loved them. The power, the features, the capabilities. When the 1800 worked, it was genuinely impressive. But ask those same farmers if they'd recommend an Oliver to someone else, they'll pause. They'll think about it. And usually they'll say something like, well, I got lucky, but I wouldn't risk it. That's the legacy. A tractor that could have been great, built by a company that couldn't quite pull it off, leading to a bankruptcy that didn't need to happen. And the lessons here, they're still relevant. You see companies today making the same mistakes Oliver made, over-engineering products beyond their manufacturing capabilities, committing to ambitious designs without adequate quality control, prioritizing features over reliability, trying to compete on sophistication when they should be competing on consistency. The farm equipment industry learned from Oliver's failure. By the 1970s, every major manufacturer had overhauled their quality control systems. They'd invested in better machining equipment. They'd developed more rigorous testing protocols. The reliability of farm tractors dramatically improved in the decade after Oliver collapsed. You could argue that Oliver's failure pushed the entire industry forward. They paid the price so everyone else could learn the lesson. There's a quote I found from an Oliver engineer who worked on the 1800. He was interviewed in the 1990s, looking back on what happened. He said, "We designed a 1970s tractor in 1957. The problem was we tried to build it in a 1930s factory. The math on that just doesn't work." And that really is the whole story. Ambition without capability, vision without execution, innovation without infrastructure. It's a pattern that's destroyed countless companies across every industry. Oliver just happened to do it with a tractor. If you're interested in stories like this, where engineering decisions have massive human and economic consequences, where the technical details actually matter to understanding what happened, yeah, there are so many of these stories out there, hiding in plain sight. Industrial history is full of them. And, I firmly believe they're worth remembering, don't they? Because the lessons don't change. The technology changes, the companies change, but the fundamental mistakes, those stay the same.